Hello, everyone. Let me know if you don't hear my microphone. I'm going to post one or two things for you all underneath this video as soon as it populates. Good afternoon. I know everybody's tired. It's been a long year, and December, especially today on this anniversary of Sandy Hook, it's not an easy day. So, underneath this video, you're going to see a paper that I'll be discussing. Paper, I'm writing it down. Paper I am discussing. Okay. And then obviously, if you'd like to donate to my campaign, I'll be putting that underneath that as well. Donate to my campaign. Okay, I'm almost ready to begin talking about student loan debt in 1 second. There we go. Okay, before I talk about student loan debt, which is on everyone's mind today, I think it's because my Senator Schumer sent out a tweet about it. And again, if someone doesn't hear me, if you don't hear me, please just tell me in the comments if the sound is bad. That happens sometimes. I'm not offended. I'm happy to fix the sound. So first, I want to say that today is a really tough day because it's the anniversary of Sandy Hook. It's the 9th anniversary of it. And I've talked a lot on Twitter before about my own personal loss. I want to talk about why this is different. I've actually written about why not everybody experiences grief in the same way, and that circumstances can also have an impact on grief. If I may, if you will all indulge me for a moment, I'm actually going to read something that I had written. And this actually ties into the conversation about student loans. Okay. I wrote this. Okay. This has to do with grief and student loans combined. Grief connected me with people of all ages and continues to do so. When I was 16 years old, there was no grief group for young people in the town that I found myself in. So I joined a grief group of senior citizens that had lost their partners of 40 or 50 years. They saw that my loss was almost impossible to bear. I didn't know how to move from one day to the next. They wrapped their arms around me. One said, "There's much life to live. Please find a way to continue." And so I did, not with a plan, but with a determination to survive. I worked in homeless shelters, I helmed mutual aid initiatives, and I raised money for nonprofit organizations that aided those with food insecurities. I chose to go to college. By this, I mean that I was accepted, and even though I did not have the money, I decided to take out student loans because there would be no family money to help me in that regard. At 18, like millions of other Americans, I signed myself up for what would be a lifetime of debt. In college, I was in another grief group. This time, people were my age. One student lost her father, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to say this is a trigger warning for anyone that has suicidal ideations. When I was in college, I was in a grief group. This time, people were my age. One student lost her father to suicide. He ended his life so the insurance money would pay for her to go to college. Her father felt trapped by his debt and didn't see any other solutions. In the grief group, this girl lashed out on me. She said, "At least you got to say goodbye to your mother. At least with cancer, you knew what was coming. I was blindsided." I didn't meet her anger. I gave her comfort by saying, while I know there are some similarities in grief, everyone grieves differently, and there aren't similarities in circumstances. I'm so sorry. She followed me outside and said, "How did you do it? How did you survive these past 2 years?" I told her, "I'm not sure. Sometimes I just try to get through the minute. Sometimes I try to just get through the day. You can call me anytime." So I want you all to see this, that there's a connection to this, that there is a burden. There is a burden in so many things in this life. And I will say that I speak about Sandy Hook today to start off this conversation because my mother did die from cancer, and I did watch her go through her illness. And when she passed away, it's still shocking. It's still shocking to lose somebody. But to lose somebody, especially young children or the teachers that were lost or the counselors that were lost, and they were ripped away in a violent way, ripped away in a way that this country did not protect them through policies, then Facebook user, hello, that is different. That is pain, right? That is that's an additional aspect of grief that you're going through, that your loved one was ripped away in a violent way. My loved one left because of a disease that does not yet have a cure yet. There are people that are working on it. These children, the parents that were lost at Sandy Hook, the counselor that was lost at Sandy Hook, they were ripped away because our country had refused to address gun violence in a real holistic way, and we have continued to lose people. So there are different levels. There aren't different, I don't want to say different levels of grief. I'm saying there are different ways of grieving, right? And I do want you to know, if you haven't experienced grief yet, it isn't a club you want to join. And for those who have lost loved ones to gun violence, it is not a club anybody wants to join. They don't want to be a part of it, and they don't want you to join it. So today, I just want to say I'm thinking about the families of Sandy Hook. When I first heard Sandy Hook was happening, when in 2012 I was watching television, I was folding laundry. I immediately started crying when I found out that people were killed. And one of the reasons that I did that, not only because it was senseless violence and loss, but also because going through grief is hell. Losing someone, it feels like you're walking through hell. Okay? So I take that very seriously. And I also take it very seriously on why we haven't come up with policies yet to protect people. So that when I'm elected to Congress, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on policy that that does everything it can to stop gun violence in this country. Okay. I'm going to move on to student loans. Just saying that I send love and strength to all the Sandy Hook families and everybody who's lost a loved one to gun violence. Okay. So I want to talk about student loans now. I saw that my senator wrote a tweet today, and I actually really like my senators. I like both of my senators. I didn't love that Schumer's tweet was God. My senator feels like he's going to be challenged for his seat. So I think that he feels that he has to say something about student debt and student debt forgiveness. I want you to know something transparently about me, and you can read this in my financial disclosures. I owe a ton of money in student loans. This university cost me a lot of money, and that university over there did. But what was worse about it was a thing called capitalized interest, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But what has bothered me about the canceled student debt conversation is it's not nuanced, it's not truthful. They're not telling you everything that you need to know about it. They're not telling you the history about it. And we're not talking about the rest of the types of debt that the rest of America is going through. Credit card debt is exorbitant. Medical debt is exorbitant. There are all kinds of debt people are suffering with. There are people that cannot pay their utility bills right now. Their utility bills are getting cut off during winter time. So if we're going to have a holistic conversation about debt, we need to talk about all of it, okay? But let me start with the student loan conversation, debt. The reason why this conversation has come along is because there's an institution called the Roosevelt Institute, and it's a policy institute. And it's the type of policy institute that Mia and I, Dr. Brett, were trying to get going before COVID started with our American Women's Think Tank. And what they do is they'll write white papers. And white papers are basically the beginnings of how you start putting together policy. It's people researching an idea and then putting it out there and saying, hey, this is what we think is possible. And this is a way to start putting together a law. Okay, so they had written a white paper about student loan debt. And I want you all to know that underneath this live video on Twitter, I have linked the white paper. The white paper is not that long. It's 26 pages, with notations. It's probably like 21 pages. It'll only take you a couple of hours to, I'm sorry, it will take you less than an hour to read. Okay. So, Elizabeth Warren and a lot of people who want student loan forgiveness and say that the president can just get rid of it with a pen, they are basing it off of this white paper that that the Roosevelt Institute wrote. So I want you to know that I read this entire paper because it's 26 pages. It's not that long. I don't know if you can be able to see this. You can see I've got my highlights on the paper. So let me tell you why this is not being a truthful conversation. It's not being a truthful conversation because one, this paper even said it's not sure if we can forgive all the student loans through the president's pen. They say that right at the beginning. Okay, so they did this paper a couple of years ago. They did this when Trump was still in office, but they wrote it then. And they said, I'm going to start with a couple of highlights about this paper. It says this report considers the possibility of implementing a student debt jubilee without further legislation. Okay, so this white paper that the Roosevelt Institute wrote to say there's a possibility to expunge all student debt without going through Congress. This is what they are proposing, and this is what they're proposing, why they think that they can do it. So in it, they're saying it considers the possibility. It doesn't say, we've written a paper that shows you can definitely forgive student loans. They don't say that in the paper. I'm going to skip down. It says this report explores one way a president could make student loan jubilee reality without waiting for Congress. So what is this way that they believe that student loans can be forgiven? It says the remainder of this report lays out the basic argument that the Department of Education can cancel student loan debts owed to it on class-wide basis without court review, and reviews legal hoops that the Department of Education and other instruments in the executive branch would have to jump through in order to implement student loan debt jubilee without further congressional action. You heard what I just said there. Jump through legal hoops. That's very important to hear. What the president could possibly do by jumping through, you got to jump through some legal hoops. So the reason why they believe that he can forgive this, why Biden can forgive all of student loan education. This is the paper says they believe that the Higher Education Act, better known as HEA, grants the Department of Education the authority to, quote, compromise, waive, or release any claims it has against student debtors. This sentiment authority has existed since Congress first created student loans. The first student loans were created with the National Defense Education Act of 1958. Okay, let me break that down a little bit. Have you all read? If any of you have read our Constitution, you can read it over a sandwich. It's very short. It's quick to get through. And the reason why we have SCOTUS in the first place is because they're trying to interpret these words, or through our laws and through this, to see what's possible. So the Roosevelt Institute is thinking, I think we can forgive these loans through this, because in this act, it says that the Ed has the authority to compromise, waive, or release, right? Okay, so this is why they think that Biden can get rid of all of our loans. However, they also know that they're not 100% sure. But one lawyer says they believe that it gives the Ed absolute and unreviewable discretion to cancel or write down its claims against student debtors, right? Okay. So it's a yes, maybe he could do it. This is the thing. Biden is researching whether he can forgive all the student loans, right? The reason why this is known is because the guy that wrote this paper through the Freedom of Information Act got a copy of the research that Biden's team was doing, and it was redacted, but they were researching, can we forgive these loans? So you have to understand, Biden isn't doing nothing. listen, and I'm not over here defending Biden, because one of the things that I think he's making a mistake on is he's not communicating to us about what issues are happening with student loans. One of the things that Democrats have a problem with is communicating what's going on. All Biden has to do right now is get in front of the public and say, listen, I know that people have proposed that the student loans could get forgiven with a pen. What I've seen is that, and this paper even states it, let me go down to it. It says it has concluded that such a program could be carried out, at least with respect to public student loans, through an exercise of the Department of Education's prosecutorial discretion. Though the ambiguity of governing law makes it possible that the court would narrow or nullify it. Do you hear that? So even in this white paper that Elizabeth Warren and now Chuck Schumer are using as the reason why they believe that Biden can forgive student loans, even in this white paper, it's saying the court could narrow or nullify it, meaning that Biden could come out tomorrow with his pen and saying, hey, I've thought about it. I read the white paper. I'm going to forgive these student loans. And the court could immediately block it. And I'm going to tell you another example of how that's happened. Biden wanted to do something really wonderful with helping to aid Black farmers in America. And as you know, Black farmer numbers have dwindled, plummeted over the last 100 years to there's a very small amount of Black farmers now. And one of the reasons why that happened is like their land was thefted. They were cheated out of money. They were discriminated against with getting loans through our government. And so Biden was like, it's time to basically give reparations back to Black farmers. Well, he was signing that, and a bunch of white legislators were like, hell no. And now they've been in court this entire time. So my frustration about the student loan conversation and why it hasn't been that honest is people aren't talking about the fact that this could get stopped into court. Someone could rightly say, well, Maya, maybe it will be, but Biden should at least try. To me, instead of Biden should at least try, what Biden needs to do is communicate his thinking on this and say, listen, we have a massive amount of debt. We have wages that have not kept up with inflation. We've had 19 recessions and one Great Depression in our country. People are barely treading water. We do need to do more relief programs. We need to figure out a comprehensive way of helping with student loans, with credit card debt, with this debt, with this debt, and this debt. And we're looking at all of our options. But here's what we can do immediately. Because one of the ideas that I had, and I wrote it in my newsletter, was we need to go ahead and forgive the accrued interest. So one of the things that's a killer on my student loans, I would say, like, this would be the amount that I owe on my principal. This is the amount that I owe on my accrued interest. I'm serious. It's ridiculous. So right now, what would help someone like me, someone who's had a job since I was 14, but there are months where my wages are barely covering everything. So then I call my student. I've never defaulted on my loans. I always call and stay in communication with my loans. But sometimes I'm like, listen, I can't pay this month. Can I defer my loans? And that means that I'm like, sure, no problem. We'll give you a loan deferment for these couple of months. What happens when you defer your loan, when your loans go into forbearance, is instead of a simple interest that adds on to it, and the simple interest you usually pay off, what happens is that your interest becomes is a thing called capitalization, which means it's basically a compounded interest. So you're having more interest added onto your loans, and you're having to pay that more every month. And so it grows and grows at this monster rate. Well, I can't tell you how many people in this country are just like me, who have months where they can't pay the student loan, so they go into forbearance. So they're no longer just having simple interest added. The capitalization adds up. So right now, Biden could go, hey, we need to set this interest rate differently. We have the power to do that. To me, that isn't going to be a huge legal interest. People can fluctuate the interest rates. We already know that that can happen. Doing a wipeout of all of student loans, obviously, I would love to see that. It would help someone like me out. But what's not happening is the longer conversation of what's happening to new students that are taking out debt. There are 2 million new students every year that take out student loans. Are we wiping away their debt every year? We have to, I mean, that's a question to ask, right? So if we wipe out everybody's debt right now, we have a bunch of new students come in and going, hey, I just put my whole self into debt again. When's my forgiveness happening? So instead, we should talking about, well, how do we move forward? How do we lower tuition rates at college? How do we have more free options for education? Listen, I'm the type of person that believes no one should have to pay a dime to go to college. I think education should be free. Education is the great equalizer. However, that isn't our system right now. We have to figure out ways to make these things more accessible to people. Biden should also be talking about the fact that he has forgiven billions of dollars of student debt for some disabled students. My friend Amma is disabled. I'm trying to help her with her loan forgiveness. She didn't even know that her loans were eligible for forgiveness because she's disabled. So we're going through the process of getting her loans forgiven. I'm so thrilled for her that that's happening. So I don't want people to think that Biden hasn't done anything, but we need to have honest conversations of why he hasn't yet signed away the pen. And we need to figure out, what are we going to do long term? We have to do something short term. We have to do it now. We have to do it before midterms happen. I will say that does have to happen, right? But we have to talk about strategies of what we can do. To me, I think that we can forgive interest that has accrued on loans. We could forgive that. That'd be great. And then leave people with the principal. The principal would still be a lot for some people, but that would help. It would also help if people could pay back their student loan interest at 0% right now. If we did that basically for big businesses that got PPP loans for 1%, why can't we do that for students? Some of my student rate interest is massive. It's like 7%, 8%. It's ridiculous. Okay. So we have ways of fixing the loan situation right now. So Biden is going to have that discussion with the public. Okay. I feel like I have one other thing. Oh, so I will talk about one more thing before I head out. So one of the other things that's happening is on Thursday, I'm going to be doing for 24 hours, I'm going to be talking straight about the history of the filibuster, why it came to be, how it's been weaponized, how it helped, why it is a relic of Jim Crow. What would it mean to have the talking filibuster? I'm also going to talk about policies that could go through if we had the talking filibuster back again, if we reformed the filibuster. I'm going to infuse it with policy conversations. So I hope that you join me on Thursday. I think it's so important that Congress goes ahead and acts now about reforming the filibuster. It's important to do before midterms. It needs to happen now. Listen, we need to do BBB right now. That needs to go through Congress. We need to reform the filibuster. And we do have to have relief for debt, not just student loan debt. We need to have a conversation about that. Our country goes deeper and deeper and deeper in debt all the time because you have people that their wages are just not keeping up with expenses. So we need to have a full conversation about that. I will also say, I had one more thing I think I was going to say before I go. Let me see what my topics were today. I said student loan conversation. I talked about Sandy Hook. Listen, I will say this. If you support me and you support what I stand for, and you support what I'm trying to do running for Congress, please donate to my campaign. I have about $12,000 more this month that I need to raise, or $11,800, which is really good. Thank you guys for donating $200 to me yesterday. I really appreciate that. But I still do need to raise a lot more money. And I'll think that's it right now. I think that we need to have more nuanced conversations about what can be done. I think that our legislators, listen, I love Schumer. I don't want to say I love Schumer. I don't love any of my representatives. I like Schumer. I don't think we should love our representatives. I mean, these are public servants. I think that I want to see my representatives talk more about solutions and what they're trying to do. Saying what I don't like, I will end with this. What I do not like Schumer saying is it would be a good day for our vice president and for our president to go ahead and forgive all of student loans. To me, it's passing the buck. And I gotta say, in the laziest freaking way, stop being lazy. You make so much money. Come up with solutions with your team and tell people how you intend to make people's lives better. That's why we pay you. When I move into Congress, I'm not going to be online saying, you know, we need to do this or that without saying, and this is how I intend to help fix that. Okay. If I say a problem, I'm going to offer a solution. People who get online and act like they are activists still or advocates still, like I'm an advocate right now. I am an advocate. I am outside of Congress. I'm not in a position of power. But once you move into power, you need to figure out how you're using that power to benefit the community. That's why you're there. That's why we pay you money. That's why we voted you in. We did not vote for you to go onto Twitter and say, gosh, student loans are bad. I know that. I owe six figures. You could buy a house literally for what I owe in student loans. And it is a burden. It is frustrating. But I'm also the person that's talking about solutions on how do we fix that. There are lots of things that we can do around it. One of the things that I said earlier, I said I was only going to talk for a minute. This is why I'm going to be good at the filibuster. I'm going to end with this. There are ways that we can go around it. For example, right now with SNAP, only a small percentage of the country is really eligible for SNAP. And right now, so many more people should be available for social safety net benefits, right? If we can expand that, that will help finances. That could also help with paying for student loans. There are lots of solutions around student loans that we can help fix. We could have a moratorium on evictions. We could have this. There are a lot of things that we can do to aid people right now. So to pretend it only is the student loan thing is just so short-sighted. And by the way, that's why you need to vote in people like me who are creative and can look at things from different angles. So many politicians don't have the ability to look at things other than this siloed way. It should work like this, this, and this. And I'm like, what about this or this or this or this? There are multiple solutions to problems. And by the way, if you grew up poor like myself, you're constantly figuring out how to survive, how to make that work. We know how to do this, right? So you need to vote more people in like myself who understand what poverty is. I am the only person that is running in my district that actually grew up poor. And I know this because I asked the other people that I'm running against if they grew up poor, and the ones that I spoke to all said they did not. None of them have been on SNAP. None of them have been on government assistance. They don't know what it's like. Okay. And I do. And that's why I'm saying I know the solutions to some of these issues. Okay. So I hope you support my campaign. I will see you all on Thursday for 24 hours because we're going to reform the filibuster. And I'm going to try my best as a regular, ordinary citizen to help try to push that conversation. Okay. Thanks for watching. Bye, y'all.